On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we preview Kansas versus Iowa State. The Jayhawks are only a 2.5-point dog to a top 20 opponent.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. This is Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast and on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you to the everydayers tuning in to each and every show. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Of course, you can find our KU North Carolina preview from yesterday for tonight's matchup. This is your KU Iowa State preview. For tomorrow's matchup, we'll have postcasts after both games as well. We're going to get into the headlines, Iowa State scouting report, importance of the game, matchups of the game, and plenty more on this episode of the show, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, where Kansas only a 2.5-point underdog at this point in time. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Kansas taking on Iowa State, 2:30 in Arrowhead in Kansas City. What are the big headlines of this game? Well, the first one is, what is the crowd going to be like in this game? And I say that both in terms of totality and how much of it will be KU fans, because you have an Iowa State fan base that, they were selling out football games when they were really bad. Like, you give them credit for that. And they travel really well to Kansas City. I mean, it's not, you can make a day drive where you drive up in the morning and drive back after the game if you want to. I've done that several times, not necessarily there, but like similar distances of places that are 2-3 hours away. And you can make it a one-day thing. You can make it a one-night thing, right? We see that with the Big 12 tournament where that's maybe a prolonged thing, but like, they have a good team. They're ranked in the top 20. Obviously, they did just come off that loss to Texas Tech where they're looking to bounce back. How does that affect the intrigue of wanting to come to this? Because you feel like, if you're them, your college football playoff hopes are dying a little bit, but they're still in the Big 12 title race. So I'd imagine they're going to have a good contingent of fans who come down for the game. And then how much attendance are we going to get from the KU side of things? Because Kansas is now 2-6. You lose the Kansas State game. You have a bye week last week where you start to, especially with basketball starting now, really focus on basketball because you didn't have football last week. You have the Kansas North Carolina game tonight where that's going to have people's attention for this weekend to start things off. It'll be interesting to see what the attendance is overall and for KU specifically in this game. And does this become a true home field advantage for KU? Does it become a bowl game type environment where it's a 50-50 crowd? Does it become a home field advantage for Iowa State? I don't know. Kansas is coming off the bye. The good news for KU is they've played well under the Lance Leipold era coming off a bye. Now, you go back to the first year Lance Leipold era, they did not play well coming off the bye. It was homecoming against Tech, and they got smashed in that game. But obviously that was, just not a great team still establishing until later in the year, still establishing what they wanted to be with the Lance Leipold era. But you go back a couple of years ago, you get a win over Oklahoma State coming off the bye. That was to get you bowl eligible, and you blew them out. I guess maybe not a blowout, but you did dominate the game. You won by 3 touchdowns against what was a top 25 opponent. Last year off your bye week, you take down Oklahoma, generational win, as Jason Benetti called it. And then this year, coming off your first bye, you took down Houston. So can you have that same success coming off another bye here? From the Kansas perspective, if you want to make a bowl game, you have to win out. I guess there's a chance that if you go 3-1, you could still make a bowl game because at that point you'd be 5-7. And then it comes down to, I think it's APR scores, which I have no idea how Kansas grades out, I guess, literally in terms of their APR scores among other teams. So maybe if they grade out really well, you can still get to a bowl game by going 3-1, but the easiest way to do it, win out. Easier said than done, though, given KU's schedule, which now features 3 straight ranked opponents. If you include their last opponent, K-State, it would be 4 straight ranked opponents on the schedule. So not great there. Beyond that, Lance Leipold is looking for a 3-game winning streak against the Iowa State Cyclones here. He's won the last 2 years. Last year was really impressive going into Ames, winning that football game in a tough way for KU. Year before was more of just kind of a weird game. Both offenses struggled, and Iowa State moved the ball a little bit, but they couldn't finish drives, and then they just kept missing field goals. And that was pretty incredible for KU because at the time it set them up to host College Game Day for the first time the next week. And then the big storyline for Iowa State coming into this one is just trying to bounce back, staying atop the Big 12 title race after losing one at home to Texas Tech. Iowa State scouting report, They come into this game as a top 20 team. They're ranked in the top 20 in the college football playoff rankings that came out earlier this week on Tuesday. And they had been, up until that loss to Texas Tech, I mean, you could argue between BYU or Iowa State, which had been the most consistent football team to this point in time, but pretty much no matter which way you cut it, like, they had been one of the most consistent teams in the conference. 7-1 is their overall record right now. They had a nice win at Iowa where they had to come back late earlier this season. They beat Houston 20-0. They beat Baylor by 22, which all of a sudden Baylor looks pretty good. They won at West Virginia by 12. They beat UCF in a comeback win, and then that loss to Texas Tech. So 7-1 is the record right now for Iowa State. When you look at their offensive side of the ball, they are 9th in the Big 12 in points per game. So I guess you would say slightly below average in points per game, but everybody really in the middle portion is stacked together really close. Like 9th could easily be 4th, and 5th could easily be 10th, and yada, yada, yada. But they're 9th in the Big 12 in points per game, but they are 4th in yards per game in the Big 12. However, they're just 8th in yards per play. I don't know why they would be so high up in yards per game, but not yards per play, but then down in points per game. I don't know. A lot of things that can go into that. They're 7th in passing yards per play and 6th in passer efficiency. They're also 24th nationally in EPA per dropback. And then they're 9th in the Big 12 in rushing yards per play, but they do have a few good backs that they can rotate, and they have a solid EPA per rush number nationally. They do rank 20th in 3rd and 4th down success rate. So they've been really good on those money downs. I think that's where Rocco Becht has really delivered so far this year for Iowa State. But most of those stats would indicate that they're a fine offense. They're a solid offense. They're not spectacular. They have some moments, but they're certainly not a bad offense. I certainly wouldn't call them a elite offense either. Defensive side of the ball, though, I would call them elite. This is one of the best units in the conference and the country. They lead the Big 12 in points allowed per game at 15.5 points allowed per game. And they're top 2 in both yards allowed per game and yards allowed per play. So top 2 in points allowed, yards allowed per play. That's a pretty good mix to have for the Iowa State defense. And this is not new. They've consistently been one of the best defenses in the conference. I'm surprised nobody's hired their defensive coordinator to be a head coach. I don't know, maybe he's just one of those guys that wants to be a DC. I don't know the total history there, but like, he is an absolute stud as a defensive coordinator. And the big reason why they rank so well in those stats, they are the leading team in the Big 12 in pass yards allowed per play. They're only allowing 5 yards per pass right now. And they're also number 1 in the Big 12 in pass efficiency defense. This is crazy. Iowa State has given up 7 passing touchdowns this season. They've collected 14 interceptions. So imagine if that was your quarterback, 7 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. You would be calling for a benching. You'd be calling for that is what quarterbacks are doing against Iowa State, because their pass defense is so good. And they've done this without, generating a ton of pressure. They're 15th in the Big 12 in sacks. They weren't great in sacks last year, right? This is a team who plays this kind of like 3-3-5 defensive stack. And so they're rushing 3 a lot of times and sitting a lot of guys back in zones. The zones are tight. They've always got like good DBs and good corners that are sticky on the outside. And that's the case again this year. And it's tough to find like openings against them. And it also forces you to be patient and take what the defense is giving you over and over and over again. And every so often there's a chance for a big play against them. Like Texas Tech ran into a couple, Kansas did last year when they won in Ames, but you have to be really patient and wait for the right time. You can't just force it in there. And then you have to run the ball. You have to be very patient. It becomes a game of discipline for the opposing offense. And even then, it's still not going to be like a great performance, because Iowa State is just so good in the Big 12. And they lead the Big 12 with 14 interceptions, which is tied with BYU, which that becomes interesting because now KU's next 2 opponents have a combined 28 interceptions. Would you take 2 interceptions combined the next 2 weeks from Jalon Daniels, knowing that? So it could be 2-0. It could be 1 in one game, 1 in the next. I don't know. The point being, this is a great pass defense, even without being a great pass rushing team, and that'll be interesting. Now, what is different about this Iowa State defense, and this is actually amazing to me that they're still top 2 in yards allowed per play, 1st in points allowed per game, is that Iowa State has been bad against the run. Like, normally they're still good against the run, even with the way they play. They're 15th of 16 teams in the Big 12 in rush yards allowed per play. Now, maybe that is a little bit of a number that is tainted by, you had to play Caleb Johnson, who's one of the Heisman candidates from Iowa, their stud running back in the second week or second game, whatever it was of the season, third game, whatever it was for Iowa State of the season, to where that's going to hurt your run defense. And a lot of other teams, maybe instead of playing them, played a team who didn't have a Heisman candidate at running back, right? To where that tainted the numbers. Even if you took those numbers out, they'd still be in the bottom half, maybe the bottom 5 even of the Big 12 in rush yards allowed per play. So there is actually an avenue for possibly doing that. But then you look at the last 2 matchups, Kansas has not been able to run the ball against Iowa State's defense. So what do we make of that coming into this one? As far as the importance of the game, you're just trying to salvage something from this season. I guess you could theoretically say any hopes you cling to of making a bowl game, you have to win this game. So that is true. But yeah, just salvaging the season by trying to pull an upset, trying to get a top 25 victory, and trying to, rekeep or regain fan interest from here with basketball season starting, I think is going to be very important for KU. Let's get to our matchups of the game. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Episode today is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within just 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post a job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We got our matchups of the game, player matchup, Hawks the Soar, little pick a prop coming at you the rest of the way here on Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. You can check out Locked On College Football for your second listen every day. All right, matchups of the game. First down. On the hat. Run the dang ball. As good as Iowa State's been on defense, we just discussed this. They haven't been good against the run. They're giving up 4.9 yards per run. They're giving up 5 yards per pass. If you're getting basically the same amount of yards running the ball as you are passing the ball, but you don't have to worry about, a team that has 14 interceptions and leaving up to that risk, doesn't it make sense to run the dang ball, And Iowa State's been elite of the elite against the pass. They are just 119th on PFF right now in tackling grade. They're giving up 5 yards per carry. Run the dang ball. The one thing I wonder about is how they haven't done it well the past 2 years. 2.1 yards per carry for KU in 2022, 3.6 yards per carry in 2023. But again, this Iowa State run defense is way worse than those past 2 years. And I think there's tangible personnel reasons you can point to. Iowa State has played like 10 different guys at linebacker this year. They've just had the worst injury luck at linebacker you could ever imagine. But the result of that is that you can run the ball a little bit more on them than some years where they have stud linebackers and they're healthy. You have Devin Neal. Let me repeat that. You have Devin Neal. We'll see if Daniel Highshaw plays. Savion Morrison looked good in the Kansas State game, but again, you have Devin Neal. Jalon Daniels can run. You also have Devin Neal. Your offensive line ranks 3rd nationally in run blocking in the country on Pro Football Focus. You also have Devin Neal. Run the dang ball. Second down, just have Jalon be a game manager. This kind of goes hand in hand, linked in with first down. It feels like so long ago that Jalon Daniels played against Iowa State. He did, though, in 2022, and that was by far his worst performance between 2022 and 2023. He went just 7 of 14, 93 yards. He had 9 rushing yards. He didn't have any interceptions, which was good, but going back and rewatching that one, he did have a pass that probably should have been intercepted. My big concern is that Iowa State has been so elite against the pass. They're 6th nationally on PFF. In coverage grade, they have those 14 interceptions, and that's the main one, the interceptions that scare me, because KU could have the best running game in the world, and Jalon could be, fine for the most part, but then you throw those 2 or 3 interceptions, especially if it's a lower scoring game, like that can be the difference in you not scoring in a red zone trip. That can be the difference in them getting a short field and scoring easier, or something that switches what is predicted to be by FanDuel at the very least, like kind of a close game. And now Jalon's done a much better job recently, but obviously early in the season, this was a big struggle for him, interceptions and avoiding turnovers. So this is something that's huge for KU. And if he can just be a good game manager, let KU try to dominate this game running the football. When you do get the key third downs, convert them at a high clip, which he has been doing these past couple of weeks. Take the check downs in this game. This is one where, maybe you find your moments for 50-50 ball here or there, but like you're better off erring on the side of caution in this game. Low risk game. Maybe there's less explosive plays in the end, which might be expected anyway, because Iowa State is second nationally in ECHL rate on defense, which is basically a measurement of like how not often they're giving up explosive plays. Be willing to live on the short stuff, the checkdowns, and let your running game control this game. Don't throw the picks. Let Devin Neal and company kind of take over. Third down, be aggressive. Now, of course, I guess you could apply this in a lot of different ways. And I know that's counterintuitive to what we just said with passing the ball, which is like, we're like, no, don't be very aggressive passing the football. So I guess specifically what I mean by this, be aggressive on fourth down decisions. I guess I would apply to, like, if you wanted to say, blitz and be aggressive on defense, because I think KU is just a better defense when they do those things. But specifically, I do mean going forward on fourth downs. And I guess not just the act of going forward on fourth down, being aggressive that on third down, you are going to go for this on fourth down. That allows you 2 plays to pick up that yardage. So Kansas has actually been good on the fourth downs they've gone for. They're 7 for 11 so far this year. Unfortunately, the 11 fourth down attempts are tied last in the Big 12. So they're not going for fourth downs very often. And actually, the team they're tied with for last is Iowa State. But if you're Iowa State, you have one of the 2 best defenses in the conference. So it's like, yeah, we're not going for it on fourth down because we have one of the best defenses. That's not the case for Kansas, right? And Kansas has also been the top third down conversion rate team in the Big 12 too. And you have good offensive players. Trust the guys on fourth down here. And in a matchup where, points, yards, positive drives, successful drives for KU are going to be more at a premium against a really good defense, you need to be more aggressive on those fourth downs, because it's like, you don't know how many chances you're going to really have of drives where you're like rolling, right? So be aggressive on those. And in a game that could be lower scoring, the difference of getting 7 in a specific drive versus 3 could be all the difference in the world. And this is honestly an area that I've always felt like KU hasn't taken advantage of and needs to a little bit more to win in the margins typically, but especially you're 2-6 right now. Let it rip. And I think this is the perfect matchup to do that. Fourth down is special teams. Iowa State's second right now in the Big 12 in yards per punt return. They do have a punt return touchdown so far this season. Meanwhile, Kansas is dead last in the Big 12 in net yards per punt. It's funny because last year they ranked so well in net yards per punt, but they didn't rank very well in yards per punt. This year it's opposite. They're dead last in net yards per punt, but they're 6th in yards per punt. So Damon Greaves has gotten more distance on it, but has it been at the cost of maybe not having as much hang time, or is it just that the return coverage has been bad for KU? I would probably argue it's been a little bit of that one, but don't let that be a thing in this game. Now, there actually is an area of this where maybe you do like KU in the special teams. I mean, the punt return game is obviously an area that you like Iowa State. Well, we go back to the 2022 meeting between these two. The biggest reason KU won that game, maybe not the biggest reason, I don't know. I'd have a hard time arguing it wasn't the biggest reason, was that Iowa State couldn't make a field goal, right? And that's certainly one of the reasons up there. And so far this year, the Cyclones have missed 4 field goals and 2 PATs. So if it comes down to that, then that actually might be an advantage for KU. I do have a quick bonus one. Normally only do 4. But I do want to add this quick one. If it does come down to Iowa State trying to key fourth down, mentioned Iowa State hasn't attempted a lot either, 11, but they're 9 of 11 on fourth down. Meanwhile, teams have converted 10 of 14 fourth downs on the KU defense. Those are both bad numbers from the KU perspective. Can you get off the field if this comes down to a potential fourth down for Iowa State? As far as our player matchup, I'm actually going to go with 2, but it's the same position, so you'll understand why. Iowa State's top 2 receivers, which is Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, versus KU's top 2 corners, Mello Dotson, Kobe Bryant. So Iowa State actually ranks outside of the top 100 in pass block grade on Pro Football Focus, but they get the ball out fast. They run a lot of play action. They do a lot of rollouts with Rocco Becht, who's been solid so far this year, to get them away from that. And they have those 2 stud receivers in Higgins and Noel that can take over games. Combined, Noel and Higgins have 98 catches for over 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns. It was crazy. So 98 combined catches between Higgins and Noel. The third leading receiver for Iowa State has just 10 catches. You know where they're going with the football in these key moments. But the good news is for KU, they should be equipped for this, right? You have two good corners to contend. We saw Mello Dotson have the big pick against Iowa State a season ago. Can KU come through again here in what should be a really fun matchup? And will the scheme allow them to be sticky enough to win those one-on-ones and not just kind of sit back and let them be attacked? All right, let's finish things up. Hawks to soar, pick a prop. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Our episode today is brought to you by Robinhood Gold, where you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Our episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get 115 bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Finishing things up on today's episode with a little Hawks to soar and pick a prop from FanDuel. Thank you for joining us today on Locked On. We'll have a postcast from the KU North Carolina basketball game tonight, postcast from the KU Iowa State game tomorrow. Okay, our offensive pick and prop here is Devin Neal. So we mentioned their two linebackers have struggled, and the reason why is because of injuries. They've given up a very decent amount on the ground. This is definitely not a game that I'm like in on any of the receivers necessarily, because if you're going to make plays, it's going to have to be tight windows, tough catch type things, which maybe that's not super predictable who would be. Luke Grimm has been his trusted guy. We saw Quentin Skinner do it last year against Iowa State. Like he could do that again in this one, certainly, but it makes the most sense for Devin Neal. They're giving up almost 5 yards per carry. Run the dang ball if you're KU. Let Devin Neal try to take over. Defensive side of the ball, we're going to go Jeremy Robinson / Dean Miller. So Iowa State's left tackle, James Neal, he has just a 48 grade on Pro Football Focus. He has just a 42 grade in pass blocking. Right now, Dean Miller leads KU with 18 pressures. Jeremy Robinson's second on the team at 17. Whichever one gets that assignment, you need to win consistently. And I think whoever it is will be able to do just that. Now, as far as pick a prop here, going over to our friends at FanDuel, Jalon Daniels is over under for passing yards, 204.5. That is not one that I'm interested in touching, knowing how good the Iowa State DBs are, the pass coverages and everything like that. And some of the receiver props are kind of the same thing, like 33.5 for LJ Arnold seems low, 44.5 for Luke Grimm seems low, but it's like, no business for me in those. Devin Neal's is 78.5 though. That is one where I feel comfortable taking the over. Jalon Daniels, 33.5. That probably would also be somewhere where I would be comfortable taking that. You can even, if you want to hedge a little bit, so you could do like Devin Neal's 60 plus rushing yards. And then you could do Jalon Daniels 25 plus rushing yards. Parlay that together, it's plus 125. And then if we want to add, add a touchdown score of Devin Neal, you get Devin Neal touchdown, Devin Neal 60 plus rush yards, Jalon Daniels 25 plus rush yards. That's plus 214. And Iowa State's 15th in the Big 12 in sacks, so less worry that they get a sack, although I just said that. They'll probably have a couple sacks in this game because that is how that works. Anyway, though, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time with LOJ.